Earlier because of the weather?
Whatever
Okay,
you feel
okay.
like, however it works.
Okay. My name's Jay, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jay.
And thank you so much for inviting me, including me in this group. And congratulations to all who have gotten chips tonight and everybody in the rooms. It's a great deal of sobriety, and I'm happy to be here. I'd like to share my experience, strength, and hope with you, and hope that it's helpful. I'm going to start by telling you that my sobriety date is June 8th, 1992. That is not my last drink. My last drink was March 27th of 1992, but I choose to have my sobriety date the day that I first came to AA. And that'll be a little part of my story. I'd like to give you a little background, not much, and I'd like to focus really on my last drink and then move to what happened next, the good part of the story. I was born in New York City, and I'm the youngest of 3 children, and I'm the youngest by 7 years. And I think that played a little role in my growing up because I was always kind of treated as the mascot, the youngest. Even by my sister today, I'm 65, and I'm still kind of the mascot. So I was born in New York City, grew up in Connecticut, and loving family, and it was the 50s and it was the 60s, and I want to kind of take this by decades, the first part. I was in my teens in the 1960s, and that's when I started drinking, around 14 years old. And really, as I remember it, it was kind of a rite of passage. I just remember that people drank, and we didn't drink drinks. We would, go to the family liquor cabinet with a big jar and then take as much as we could from the 5 families and put it together and drink that. And that was the first start of it. And then you get a little bit older, and Connecticut was a 21 years old state for drinking at the time, and New York was 18, and I lived right across the border, so it was easy to go to New York and drink in bars, and that's what I did. So it was kind of a rite of passage. It was what I thought, and most of my friends thought that's what you did. At 18, I was off to college, and I would just say, I should have known something, but it's never a good idea to pick the college of your choice based on the drinking age in the state. But I did. So went to school in New York, and where I was 18, and continued. So the 60s was the beginning of my drinking career. I graduated from college in the early 70s, and the 70s and 80s was really the focus of putting the hammer down and drinking in earnest. Like an adult, like I remembered seeing, family and friends at parties in the 50s and 60s drink. I would say sometime in the 70s, I got the sense that I was in trouble. And I actually stopped drinking for 11 months, but with no program, no program at all. I just stopped drinking. I was in the process of getting a postgraduate degree, and I just stopped drinking, and then, but no program at all. So I didn't change. There was no change involved. There was no program. There was nothing. And as soon as something came up that was tough to deal with, I went back to drinking. And that was, I drank on all occasions. I mean, it didn't have to be happy or sad or anything. But in the 70s and 80s, I really left any sort of social drinking to a really heavy drinking, and probably an alcoholic. I mean, I thought that 11 months would prove that I wasn't an alcoholic, but, that was that. When I got to the 80s, I was married, and in the late 80s, and still drinking. And my last drink I'd like to talk about. My last drink was on March 27th, 1992. And by that stage, I had really I'd gotten to a position in my job where I was kind of the head of the job. And so I felt, look, I can't get drunk during the week. So I really became a binge drinker. So the last couple of years of my life, trying to delude the fact that I wasn't an alcoholic, I was a serious binge drinker. I'd just wait and plan out what days I had to be, doing my job, and then drink on the other times. So March 27th in the school business is spring break, and on that Friday night, I went out without my wife and daughter. My wife to this day says she knows that she could see something in me that was different. And I went to visit my drinking friends. And in those days, I actually had 5 friends that were significant, heavy drinkers, and then people that I worked with who maybe I was trying to hide my disease from, who were just, I would maybe socially drink with them, but certainly not do the binge drinking. It's interesting, of those 5 friends who are, we're really close to, but the only thing that kept us together was the alcohol. Whether we were watching sporting events or going to concerts and so forth, every party revolved around alcohol. That's the whole deal. And of those 5, 2 of us are in sobriety. One's dead. The other one lost everything. His job, had a great job, and the other one's still out there. So, that was kind of what happened right up at the end. I went to find my friends, and I have to tell this story of the last drink that I didn't find out about the whole story till about 6 months later, because I was in a blackout during the last drink, as you can well imagine. And so I had to find out from the various bars that I went to and the people involved and so forth, and then the lawyer and the judge, because it ended up that I was in a DUI. And what happened in the last drunk was that I found one of these drinking friends. We started out in one place, went to a second place. By the end of the second place, I have no memory. We went to a third place. A lovely, lovely young lady who was a waitress at that place saw the condition that I was in, called a cab, got me a cab, and because whether I was cunning and powerful and whatever, baffling, I snuck out and got into my car. And drove my car through on a sidewalk. I didn't hit anybody or kill anybody. I'm blessed about that, but through a police stop zone. Now, this is one of those things that you always think about. What if? This young lady who was so kind and went out of her way to do this, she was great friends with Beth, my wife, and me, and she called the cab and did everything she could to get me in there, and I wheedled out of the thing. In sobriety, I went to her funeral. She died in a drunken driving accident where she wasn't drinking, killed by a drunk driver. And I think of her, and I think of, it's just one of those you never know. You never know. So I was arrested and taken to jail and then taken to the county jail. I don't remember any of this. The next day, coming home, being picked up at jail by my wife and daughter. My daughter was 13 months old. I knew that this was it. Now, during those 60s, 70s, and 80s, trust me, I drove drunk so many times, I don't know why I was never stopped. I don't know why. I mean, I was even stopped one time by a cop, and because the guy that I hit, it was a rear end deal, the guy that I hit was in Boston in the 70s, and he had platform shoes and a lot of hair and not funny, but different clothes. The cop didn't arrest me. I was like 2 or 3 blocks from home. I didn't look like that. I was unbelievable. I mean, how does that happen? So there were just these things that said, well, I'm invincible. Like, I'm not going to get caught. And then I got caught. So I called a friend of mine who I knew was in the program, and he was a priest, Episcopal priest. And he said, look, that was the next day I called. And he said, look, I'm going to give you the name of a lawyer. You got to take some time off, sort things out, but I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. And so I called the attorney and then went through that whole process of what kind of defense I was going to do, because I was going to try and get out of this thing. I was going to do the Prozac defense. I was on Prozac, and I mixed the things, and da-da-da-da. And then he said, listen, they took a tape of you, and my experience is when you see the videotape, you're not nearly as bad as you think you were. And so we'll use the videotape, and that'll prove that you weren't as bad as you think you were, and we'll move on from there. But let me see the videotape, and I'll get back to you. Calls me in the afternoon. He said, videotape is out. You're not using that thing. I said, oh, my God. And he said, no. You're lucky they erased these things. That's what he said. He said, I got to see this. He said, you don't want to see this? I said, no, I think I need to see this. And I remember sharing this at a meeting over at the Wilder Building, and Buddy, the late, great Buddy McCarter from Laurinburg, said, maybe that was, when they say you stood at the turning point, from the big book. And I saw that videotape, and I saw a person that was not me, but it was me. I mean, it was definitely me. and with all the clothes on, and I'm sorry, 2 cops on each arm, one in front of me, who I puked on. This was bad, and that might have been the turning point. Not enough to make me go to AA that next day. Still in denial. Acceptance was a big, my friend, well, it's good for you that you're a priest and you're in AA, but come on, there's something that I got to get out of this thing. And after some time, the lawyer said, look, you're going up against this judge. Just say you did it and take your punishment and move on. And trust me, if you stick with your friend, the priest, you got a shot. And so I did, and got the probation and the payments of the court fines and all this stuff. But the part of the order was to go to AA a couple of times a week and go to counseling a couple of times a week. And so my priest friend took me to my first AA meeting on June 8th, and it was in Winter Park, Florida, which is where I got sober. And went into the meeting, and I don't remember anything except what I saw before I entered. And what I saw on the sign before I entered was what I heard our celebrants saying today, the people who have gotten their medallions today. What I saw on the sign is, you are not alone. You are not alone. Don't remember a thing anyone said in those meetings. But I remember that sign, and I go back there. Every time I go back there, I go to that particular meeting that was my home group then, and I see that sign. I just shake my head, because the essence of my story is that I just don't feel alone when I'm in AA. I just don't feel alone. They're demons kind of all over the place, but if I take that hour and go to meetings and talk to my sponsor and talk to people and do those things, I'm not alone. Bad things have happened in sobriety, and I've dealt with them. I never dealt with them when I was drunk. So that "you are not alone" made a huge impression on me. The tracing it back to, I condensed that part simply because, we've all been in places like that, maybe not exactly with a drunk driving, but in a blackout and not knowing. And to discover, I didn't go back to those bars after that. And I should say for a while. And I stopped seeing the 5 friends for a while. And then I went back to the bar with my wife, and it was a restaurant, So and they were there, and it was as if nothing had changed. I mean, it was, where have you been, and so forth. And they were great. I mean, they were great people and nice people, but they're still at it. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay in the restaurant, and we said hi and got out of there. But that whole idea, and then later had to go to a horrible funeral of this woman that tried to help me. These things all played a role. My sponsor is still the priest from Florida. He lives in Florida. I live here. He's still my sponsor. And we talk. I have lots of friends in this community. I've lived here for 15 years. Worked across the street, as a matter of fact, in a little school over there. And this is the first time I've been to this meeting. In 15 years, I've been to meetings all over the place. So I thank you for introducing me to the Tuesday evening Brownson meeting. What happened when I started going to AA meetings is to me the important part of the story. And it's a story that, it just didn't happen overnight. Nothing happened overnight. And I was told that. I saw the slogans on the wall, and I was told, don't drink and go to meetings, and, first things first. And every time I was told those things in the beginning, I didn't like it. I didn't like the fact that I felt like somebody was telling me what to do. As an alcoholic, I don't know many alcoholics that like to be told what to do. But my sponsor said, look, these are suggestions. These are little sayings that have been tried and true. And darn it, if, this many years later, those things are treasured possessions. I mean, I don't possess them, but I mean, they're things that I look at. Don't drink and go to meetings. I mean, I'm hearing that in everybody that's come up and shared about how they've stayed sober, and that was a big thing. And for me, early sobriety was tough, and it was tough because of the acceptance part. I knew I was powerless. And I knew my life was unmanageable from the standpoint of saying I had to plan my drinking. I mean, at the end, on these binge drinkings, I mean, you're getting ready to go to a party and you have a half gallon of scotch and you're drinking from the half gallon to get prepared for the party. That is not normal behavior in my view. And that's what I did. I mean, I had to have a buzz before the whole thing happened. So the first part of sobriety was a little tough because the acceptance wasn't there, but that sign was there and I didn't feel alone. And gradually, when I heard people's stories and when I heard their experience, what their experience was, and whether they came in through the court system or whether they came in through rehab or whether they just walked in the doors or however they came in, they were like me. And all of a sudden, the acceptance started the unacceptance started to melt away and the acceptance started to come in. And I found that so in every part of the big book, in every part of the steps. Acceptance, willingness, honesty. I mean, all the things that they talk about. I mean, I progress, not perfection. I love that. Honesty is very important, but I will tell you now that my progress is that I lie less. I don't lie. I mean, I still lie, but I'd like to think I don't lie at the important things. I try and not hurt people's feelings and stuff like that. And if that's a lie, that's okay. And to me, but gradually, day by day, step by step, I went to far more meetings than the 2 a week that they suggested because I started to get it. I started to feel a part of something. I wasn't alone. The counseling was very helpful. On the year of when I got my first medallion from this great priest, and he gave me my medallion, I went to the Winter Park Police Department, the arresting officer, and I wanted to make amends. I had gone through the steps with my sponsor in the first year, and really continued after that. There was a lot of tune-ups, and of course there are a lot of tune-up steps like the 10th, and the 4th and 5th I think are good too. They're all great. But I went to Officer Bishop and tracked him down at the Winter Park Police Department to let him know that that arrest had for this year changed my life. And I asked for him. They sent him out. He came out. And I said, Officer Bishop, I'm Jay. I'm Jay, and I just want you to know that on March 27th you arrested me for drunken driving, and I've been sober for a year, and I'm very grateful. And I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry you had to go through that, and I'm sorry for all of that. But I just want you to know that it's made a difference. I believe it's made a difference in my life. And he looked at me, and he says, I don't remember you. And my defects of character jumped right in there. I wanted to be the best DUI that he ever had, and he didn't. Don't you remember the puking? Come on. But Officer Bishop, that was a good thing. That was a good thing for me to hear. Just like all the rest, maybe. And little things happened along the way in sobriety, day by day, and they mounted up. And you think, how do you end up getting a medallion of it? There's like 30 days is a long time. I mean, 4 years. I mean, and I started to establish friends in the program. I stayed very close to my sponsor in those first 2 years. He was incredibly helpful to me, and the steps were incredibly helpful to me. The meetings, I was working full time. The meetings were very, very important. I could get to a lot of noon meetings. I always went on the Saturday and Sunday morning meetings. And my life started to change. But it didn't start to change until those principles that you were talking about acceptance, about willingness, about being open, started to be part of my life. In the beginning, I was rather fanatical about AA, and I went in and I cleaned the ashtrays and I did this stuff and so forth. And luckily, I didn't do any speaking about that. No one ever asked me to speak which was lucky for them, because I was so closed in terms of saying that AA is the only way. And I'm not, look, AA is, for me, it's the thing. But I know people that have gotten sober through God and through Scientology and other things, and I say, God bless them, that's fine. But it's not, for me, this program has helped tremendously. So that first 2 years in Winter Park were really, really helpful. And I think that after a year or so, I became better at my job, but I still had a lot of guilt about my alcoholism from all those years before. And I felt that I'd been at this school for 13 years, and I felt that I needed to make a move. And I felt guilty about having been an alcoholic when I was there. And so I moved, and I talked to my sponsor about it, and he said, well, you're 2 years out, you don't want to make the move after one, but you really want to think about this. And so I spoke about it in a meeting, and then I got a job, and I got a job in South Florida, and then I started getting anxious about the fact that I was going to leave my home group. I was going to leave the AA that I had become sober in and changed my life. And But I thought it was the right thing. I had a lot of parents who were in my school and former students that were in there and so forth. And that was good. But I just felt the need to leave. But I remember sharing at a meeting. It was just before I was about to go. And this is how AA works for me. There's these non-coincidences, which I've come to believe are not coincidences. I'm in there talking about being anxious about leaving and going to Fort Lauderdale, to Plantation, Florida. And a woman who's at the meeting says, this is very interesting because I just left there to come here, and I was feeling the same thing. But I'm here. You're going to be fine. You can take my chair. You can come back to, I'm here, and I hear what this is, and it's AA, and it's going to be the same for you. It's going to be the same. Well, it wasn't exactly the same, but that's okay. It was great. So I took that as a sign. A friend that was in AA for years and years and years, and he doesn't attribute this line to himself, but I always attribute it to him because he was a smart guy, a great writer and so forth. And he always would say, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. You can say higher power, or you can say whatever it is, but I rather like that. And the things that have happened over these years, through things that involve health issues, either mine or somebody else close to me. I got through those health issues through people in AA. My family helped a lot, but it was the people in AA that went through stuff, that was much worse than I was going through, and to me, it was like they sailed through it, but they shared what they had gone through, and they shared how they went through it. It's one alcoholic helping another. It doesn't even have to be about alcoholism. And they helped me in this health issue, which to me was unbelievable. And where would that happen? Where else would that happen? I just don't think anywhere. And so, there have been health issues that have happened that I know in another life, in that other life, would have resulted in alcohol, death in the family. I mean, my father was, when my father died, I was not sober. And a big part of that early childhood stuff, and I don't blame my father at all. I drank every drink, and I was not, he didn't make me drink and all of this stuff. But one of the things about this mascot business was that in my view, and this I discovered probably at the 6th, 7th, 8th year, who knows? But I think I know why I drank. I mean, not feeling good about myself was brought on by not being good enough in my father's eyes. That I wasn't the athlete that my brother was, and I wasn't as smart as my sister. And I felt, well, that's fine. I'll drink and I'll be somebody else. And that's what I did. And so from teenage years on, I couldn't be if you talk to my neighbors in that time, when you're 15, 16, all the neighbors in the town that I grew up in, they would swear to you that they would far rather have my father than their father. But that was because when he came home from all these trips, he'd take us to Coney Island, he'd take us to the thing, and he'd always talk to them, and they loved him, and he did that. I just wasn't feeling it, and so that was a big part of, I think, why I drank. But to get back to the recovery part, each segment, whether it was a decade or a day or a year, it seemed to build. The more meetings I attended, the more something would happen and I'd get through it, the stronger I felt. And not strong in an ego way, like being the best drunk that Officer Bishop ever picked up, but by just adding some foundation to my life. And I almost feel that my sobriety date was in my 40s. I mean, I really believe that that's my year one. We measure them in those years. So I had to go through, and now I'm kind of, thankfully, beyond puberty and going into adulthood, I guess, at 22 years. But I needed to have the time all the way through to hear the things that I needed to hear at the time. Today, I love to go to meetings and see newcomers and younger people come in. I have to hear the old timers or people that have a lot of sobriety share their sobriety. I occasionally fall into a funk, take back my will, and will say something like, these meetings are all the same people say the same stuff, and I think. And I remember speaking at a meeting not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I said, I really love hearing the newcomers, which I do. It makes me remember when I was new, and the old timers were saying, the don't drink, go to meetings works for me, and first things first works for me, and the repetition works for me. And I think, they're right. I mean, those are the things that I came to embrace when I was starting out. I did not like the slogans. I did not like this, but I have to hear over and over again that I'm Jay and I'm an alcoholic. I accept that now. I have to hear somebody's experience. It may not be exactly like mine, but they're sharing their experience and they're sharing what they feel at that moment. And if it's something that they've repeated 15 times in the last 15 days, I need to hear that now. I need to hear that. And that's, I do think that's a bit of taking back my will. And I find every once in a while I drop into a whiny place, but then to go to a meeting and hear the things that I needed to hear, it gets me out of it. So be grateful that I came this night and not 2 or 3 weeks ago. Early sobriety brought forth for me 2 very important things. The first, I was very, very close to my brother. And my brother, I had a health issue. I had a kidney transplant 4 years ago. Went into the hospital on May 5th. I was out of the hospital 2.5 days later. My brother went to the hospital May 4th, never got out of the hospital. Died May 27th. Agent Orange from Vietnam. And my brother was a hero to me, and he was like just a great, great guy. And he never held it over me that he was a great football player. I mean, he never did. I was his younger brother. He stood up for me all the time. He actually almost came to blows with my father one time about some thing that my father wanted me to do, and my brother just said, "That's not happening." And I mean, it was good. I like that. My first year of sobriety, at the end of my first year, I was going to visit my brother, lived in Akron, and he said, well, do you want names of people? I mean, he knew. I shared all this with my family. I said, yeah, I really would. And then I got to Akron, and I said, oh, geez, I'm not going to call this guy. I can't call him. And so I said, but you know what? Dr. Bob lived in Akron, and I think there's a house. Can we go to that? And he said, absolutely. So my brother takes me to Dr. Bob's house in Akron, in a little row house, and maybe many of you have been here, but it absolutely shocked me in such a positive way. To go into this house that the co-founder of AA lived in, and they have Super 8 movies, maybe condensed from 16 or whatever, that show the process of what they would do and bring people into their house and put them in a room. And it was a very spiritual experience. And they had to repair the chimney And so the chimney had collapsed, and they had saved the mortar that was between the bricks and stuff like that, and kind of chunked them up into little chunks and left them in a bag, and you can actually buy one. I thought, I'll take a piece at Dr. Bob's house. So I got one, paid $5 and put it in my pocket and kept it. And then a woman in my home group on her second year, just before I moved to Fort Lauderdale, got her first year medallion. And I thought, geez. So and she was great. I mean, she was an older woman, and she had had these great struggles, and she was just really wonderful. And so I gave her this just to say, look, I take this. This is from Dr. Bob's chimney. When I go back to that Winter Park meeting, so 21, 22, I see her, and she still got the little chunk. I mean, this is like a great thing to me. So Dr. Bob's house was a very spiritual experience. I didn't call the guy that my brother had set up, but felt that was really a strong thing. In about my third or fourth year of sobriety, my sister was living up in Dutchess County, New York, which is a little north of New York City, and maybe an hour and 15 minutes south of Albany, and not that far from Vermont. So I'd read about Bill W., and I was now living in South Florida, and I was sponsoring a guy whose father got sober after his son did, and his father painted, I should have brought that picture, his father painted Bill W.'s house in Vermont, in East Dorset. The house that he was not born in, that's across the street, but the big red house with the white shutters and it has meetings and everything else. So I drove up there from Clinton Corners, and it was a sunny summer day, and I went to Bill W.'s house and walked in and bought, I think I bought the As Bill Sees It book, and it was an amazing experience. They actually, I think you can go to the house that he was born in, but he soon moved over to this thing that's now kind of a hotel, and you can stay there and have meetings all day and stuff like that. That was a very big thing for me. And then near there, at the house, they actually give you a map. And the map is to Bill W. and Lois's grave. And it's not far. It's off Route, 9, I forget. It's one of the main things. It's not far. It's near you go up to the general store and turn around. So I take the map, and it's like this treasure map. It says you go this way and get to a tree that's kind of rotted or half down and half up, and go in 8 gravestones and look down, and there you are. So I follow this map, and I'm by myself, and I follow this map, and I get out of the car, and it's a sunny day, and the wind's blowing, and it's beautiful, and I get up, and I walk up, and I look at the tree, and I get the thing, and I see the first thing, and I walk 8 paces, and I get over here, and I look down, and I see these 2 unmarked graves. There's nothing on them, and I'm thinking, my God, what humility. There's nothing. It doesn't even say Bill Wilson. It doesn't say anything. And I look up, and of course I'm in the wrong row, because the real ones are right up there where Dave is, and they've got Bill W. and Lois, and they got flags and oranges and notes to Bill W. and medallions that people have left. And I lost it there. Wrong in the row, but I finally got the right message, and some years later I went back with my wife and daughter. I'd say about 3 or 4 years later. And we got there, and there was a family like ours, a younger family, younger than me, but a husband and wife and a child, and they were at the gravesite, and I wasn't going to go over there. And I thought, the amount of lives that have been touched by these people, what a gift, what an absolute gift. Here's this family, don't know his story, didn't talk to him or anything, but, my daughter doesn't remember at 13 months my being picked up by my wife at jail, and so hasn't seen me drink, and for that I'm grateful. And there's only one reason for that, and that's AA. Many things have happened. So from Fort Lauderdale, I was there 5 years, and then I moved up here, and I've been here for 15. And much has happened in my life outside of AA. But I have to tell you that I believe almost all of it has been affected by AA. How I react to things is different than when I was drinking heavily and alcoholically. I mean, from the 70s and the 80s, and the sarcasm and I'd like to think I'm optimistic. I wasn't always like that. And I can attribute none of it to anything except this program. I'm very grateful, obviously, to my wife who stayed by me, but I don't, it's just one of those things. Where would I be if I had not found Alcoholics Anonymous? And the answer is not in a good place. Not in a good place if I continued doing what I was doing. So, to me, while other people have other things, and God bless them for finding a way to stay sober, AA has been just my lifeblood through everything. Sometimes I think that it has almost more effect on my outside life than it does. I'm still not drinking, but other things have been just so impacted in a positive way because of the relationship I've had with Alcoholics Anonymous, the people who I've met. I go back to those places in Winter Park and Fort Lauderdale, and I go back to those clubhouses, and I see some of the people that I got sober with and visited with, and I see a lot of new people. And I'm forever grateful for that. AA has touched on the lives of so many. I hope that it's taught me more about acceptance. I mean, I believe it has, but not to say in some sort of ego way. It's all through AA, but this whole idea of acceptance, awareness, willingness. It's just been a real blessing. And the people I've met and sponsored, and the person that sponsored me, I just have tremendous gratitude. And none of it would be if it weren't for AA. So I would just like to close by thanking Karen for asking me to be here. Wish you the best on your trudge, which I believe it is. And I don't think trudge is a negative word. I just think it means doesn't happen overnight. And I would just like to thank you. I'm very grateful to have been able to be here, and I hope something or one thing or anything that I said might be helpful. So thank you so much.